Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video, and today we're talking Oklahoma City Thunder basketball, my favorite team. If you've been on the channel for probably even a second, if you've ever seen any of my tweets, if you know who I am, you'll know that I'm a diehard Thunder fan. I consider myself the biggest Thunder fan in the world, and right now is one of the best times ever to be a fan of OKC, because coming off a massively successful 2023 season, they're now going into the 2024-2025 campaign as the favorites in the Western Conference. If you look at any of the betting odds, if you ask most people who they have winning the West, they're probably going to tell you it's Oklahoma City, which is crazy to me when I consider where they were just a few years ago. They didn't get Chet Holmgren very long ago. They were getting Jalen Williams. They got Josh Giddey, who of course is no longer here, but he was a top 6 pick just a few seasons back. They were in the play-in before this past year. They have rapidly risen up the ranks, and it makes sense why people are picking them to win the Western Conference. They were just the 1 seed, the youngest 1 seed ever, made 2 massive acquisitions this offseason that plugged some of the holes in this team with Alex Caruso, Isaiah Hartenstein. They've got the coach of the year. They have an MVP caliber player. They were amazing on both sides of the ball, top 5, a young team that can only rapidly ascend. This is a terrifying force of a team, and I feel like a lot of people respect that, but at the same time, even amongst the people that are picking the Thunder to win the Western Conference, to maybe even win the NBA Finals, which they have a real shot to do this season, I don't think people are comprehending enough just how scary and dominant this team has the potential to be. So I want to go ahead and break down why this is the chance to be the best Thunder team ever, the team to finally raise the Larry O'Brien, and a squad that has so much dominance even beyond just this season in the tank. So let's get into it. First of all, they have everything they need to win an NBA title on the roster right now, and it starts with having a superstar. To win in the NBA more times than not, you need a superstar, and they have one in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He was, of course, dominant in the regular season, finishing second in MVP voting, making another All-NBA first team, and dropping stats like 30.1 points per game, 5.5 rebounds, 6.2 assists, and 2 steals, while shooting 63.6% true shooting percentage, which was the 4th highest mark in that stat of anybody who scored 25 or more points per game, only behind Joel Embiid, Giannis, and Nikola Jokic, all of whom are 7-footers and top 5 players in the world themselves. He was the model of consistency throughout the season too, had 51 games of 30 or more points, and came just 1 game short of scoring 30 against every single team in a single season. This, of course, carried over into the playoffs. He wasn't just a regular season merchant, he was dominant in the postseason too, because throughout his 2 series, he put up 30.2 points per game, 7.2 rebounds, and 6.4 assists. Those numbers all jumped from where he was in the regular season, all improvements, and had a 58.2 true shooting percentage, which is the 4th best amongst anybody who averaged 25 plus, and made the second round, only behind Jokic, Anthony Edwards, and Donovan Mitchell. So he's in the company of some of the best scorers in the world. He was putting up unbelievable numbers, and specifically in that Mavs series, a great defensive Mavericks team in front of him, he shot over 50% from the field, 55% from 3, while dropping 32.2 points per game, including a Game 4, which was one of the most dominant solo scoring efforts I've ever seen from a Thunder player in a playoff game. He literally could not miss, it felt like, and it was strictly mid-range jumpers. He's one of those guys that can get to a spot in the mid-range, shoot over anybody, whether it's a turnaround, it's a baseline fade, you've got 3 hands in his face, it doesn't really matter. He's one of the best finishers around the rim out of anybody in the league. There's really no way to stop him from getting downhill because he's slithery, he's quick, he's got great burst, he's got a great 3-point step back jumper that he goes to a lot, and that 3-point percentage continues to climb and climb, really rose steadily all throughout the end of last season until he was again on fire in the Mavs series. He's a great defender too. There's really no knock on Shai's game. He's one of the most complete players in the NBA, one of the most dominant scorers we've seen in the league all throughout the past decade plus. And after what he did this season, there should be no question about if Shai can dominate in the playoffs the way he does in the regular season. His game translated pretty directly, and despite offensive dips from almost everybody else on the roster in that Mavs series, he nearly willed the Thunder to a Game 7 against the eventual Western Conference champions. If you ask most people, they will tell you that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a top 5 player in the world, and that, in my opinion, should be a consensus. There is nothing that can take him out of that top 5 conversation. He has proven it over the past couple of years. And when you have that type of player, you can win any game, you can make any type of run, especially when you take a look at the talent that the Thunder have around him, which I believe will allow him to have the best season of his career. Shai has steadily leveled up every single season that he's played. There's no reason I think he's going to take any regression this season. They brought in players that complement him, including a high-level screener in Isaiah Hartenstein, who's going to make his life so much easier. He's never had a guy to really set those big body screens. The Thunder typically just slip them. Now he's got someone to create space for him to get to that mid-range jumper a lot easier. He doesn't have to work for it as much. The efficiency is going to rise. The points per game, I believe, could go up more with the usage that Josh Giddey had now gone. Shai's going to go out there and, in my opinion, win the MVP award. Another thing you typically need to win a championship is a pretty good defense, and the Thunder happen to have an elite one. This past season, they were the fourth best unit in the league on that end, and the second best defensive team in the playoffs. Chet was an elite anchor down low. They had a bunch of length on the perimeter, fast hands guys like Dort, Cason Wallace, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Dub, Aaron Wiggins. They were just all over the place, forcing turnovers, making plays left and right, getting out and running. They were a nightmare to go up against, and they were one of the best defensive teams despite giving up a ton of offensive rebounds due to a lack of size. They were giving teams extra chance after extra chance. There were some possessions where the Thunder would give up like 5 offensive rebounds, but the defensive talent was just so stout, they were still clamping up most of the time, and it allowed them to be one of the best units in the entire league. And on top of all that, they added 2 guys who will only further enhance the strength of theirs in Isaiah Hartenstein and Alex Caruso. Caruso, of course, has been one of the best defensive guards in the NBA for years and gives the Thunder another matchup nightmare for opposing scorers who can also really fit that turnover forcing identity that the Thunder defense has. Not to mention he can play alongside a number of guys on the roster in any lineup at the 1, 2, or even the 3 because he plays bigger than he is if they want to go that route. And with him, Dort, Chet, and Shai, that gives the Thunder 4 players who received all defensive votes last season, which is tied with Boston for the most in the NBA. And that doesn't include aforementioned guys who also can really cause havoc defensively like Cason Wallace and Jalen Williams, who are fantastic on that end and are going to continue to grow as defenders this season. Hartenstein as well is going to help tremendously with the rebounding. He's going to prevent some of those second chance opportunities, while giving the Thunder another big body to throw at opposing teams, which brings a lot to the table. Last year in the playoffs, one of the Thunder's biggest problems was the non-Chet Holmgren minutes because of all he did defensively, the way that he completely revolutionized the team on that end when he was on the court. Like, the Thunder were 18.2 points better in the playoffs in terms of net rating this season when Chet was on the court versus when he was off, and that's a ridiculous swing. When Chet came off, they really started to fall apart. Now you add Hartenstein, who's a linchpin at the center spot for the Knicks last year, and he brings everything the Thunder could ask for. He brings rim protection, size, rebounding, shot blocking, and has the versatility to play with Chet at the 5 while Chet slots over to the 4, or as the lone big. Whatever you want to do with those 2 guys, there are so many ways you can run it. You could have him come off the bench, but then finish a game. You could start the 2 of them in the starting lineup, or you could just do it completely based off matchup. If you have a team that runs 2 bigs or has a lot of size, and you don't really want Chet to be the one banging down low, they'd rather have him get out and kind of stretch the floor a little bit, play that roaming role instead, maybe on an opposing team's worst shooter, you can do that. You could put Chet and Hartenstein in the starting lineup. If it's a team that doesn't have a lot of size, that kind of goes small, maybe just run Chet at the 5, have Hart come in, you kind of bring their minutes back and forth, and maybe you end up closing with them. There's just so many ways they could operate this team with Caruso. It could be a Shai, Caruso, Dort lineup out there with Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren. You could put Dort on the bench if the shot's not falling and put Caruso out there instead. But the Thunder's top 9 being Shai, Dort, Dub, Chet, Hart, Caruso, Wallace, Joe, and Wiggins, there's not a weak defender on there, and a majority of those guys are good to elite defenders. There's no weakness at all in that lineup on the defensive end. They have a chance to not only be the best defense in the NBA, which I think they will be, but they have the chance to be one of the best ones we've seen in quite some time. And the fun part is that that defense is matched by an elite offense as well. They were the 3rd best offensive team in the league last season, 8th best in the playoffs. They did take a bit of a dip, and there were a few reasons for this. One of them was that Josh Giddey became a liability, and it reached a point where if he was on the court, teams were just completely sagging off, letting him shoot, and that really killed a lot of the spacing. There's a bit of a drop-off in efficiency from Chet Holmgren and Jalen Williams as well, and there were some shooters that were struggling to knock down some of their looks. I believe a lot of that was due to a lack of experience. That's what we talk about when people went to the playoffs and said, said, I like this Thunder team, but I feel like they could struggle a little bit because they haven't really been here before. I think the lights were bright for this young Thunder squad, but now that they've been there and they've got more supporting pieces, I expect that efficiency to take a bit of a jump, and the new additions will certainly help that. Alex Caruso, 40% three-point shooter, and even if he dips a little bit, he's someone that teams absolutely have to worry about. Hartenstein is a phenomenal passing big, and his offensive rebounding will generate more looks to increase offensive output, plus the screening, as I mentioned with Shai, is going to be big for everybody, not just him, because the team really struggled to create in ISO outside of Shai. In the playoffs, that was one of the reasons why the offense struggled a little bit. Like, for example, Jalen Williams wasn't really getting to his spots the way that he typically did in the regular season. Now you give him a screener like Isaiah Hartenstein to just clear space out and make his life so much easier. He also adds verticality to the team, that he can go ahead and jump above the rim, catch some lobs, because the Thunder leaned into that a little bit with Chet, but I think now that iHeart's out there, they can lean even further into that, adding that dimension of vertical spacing. He's got that great push shot. He's just a very versatile offensive big, not to mention just the fact that Hartenstein will be taking some of the workload off Chet will allow, in my opinion, Chet to shoot better than he did in the playoffs, because he was one of the biggest three-point droppers, and you could see throughout the season with him playing all 82 games and heavy minutes in those games, being asked to do almost all the rim protection, his shot really started to turn into a laser. It was nowhere near the arc that we saw at the beginning of the season. The three-point percentage dropped and dropped and dropped throughout the year. I think he really started to lose his legs. You know, rookies typically hit a wall. They start to get exhausted at the end of a long season. Plus, you give the playoffs a shot. With Hartenstein out there and Chet having a second year now that he's experienced the NBA physicality, he's only going to be more and more efficient this season. I would bank on that easily. All in all, the Thunder go into this season offensively with the league's most consistent 30-point scorer, really solid secondary options in Chet and Jalen Williams, great role players who help to assemble a team that, outside of Isaiah Hartenstein, who doesn't really attempt a lot of threes, although everything we're hearing from training camp is he's going to make that more of a concerted effort to shoot those, which would be big as well for the spacing. The squad really doesn't have a bad shooter on the team. Even Shai, who's considered, again, one of the most dominant interior scorers, he ended up shooting 35.3% from the outside, and that's the worst out of anybody who is going to be getting rotation minutes consistently this season. Like, Aaron Wiggins shot 49.2%, and Mark Daigneault said he's going to increase his volume. J-Dub shot 42.7%, another guy that Mark said is going to shoot more threes this season. Cason Wallace, 41.9%. Isaiah Joe, 41.6%. That's four 40% shooters right off the bat. Lu Dort right under that at 39.4%. Chet shot 37%. Alex Caruso, another 40% shooter. He shot right about that last season too. Everybody can shoot the ball, space the floor, is a threat, which is a massive improvement. Again, where the Thunder at one point had Giddey, who the other team was just letting shoot. They were giving him the Ben Simmons treatment. Now there's nobody you can leave open, and if you leave anybody for a second, Shai's going to find them, kick out to them. But if you don't put extra pressure on Shai, he's just going to get to his spot consistently, with Dub and Chet also creating. It's a nightmare to match up against. And a lot of this is just taking the team at face value, looking at numbers from the past few seasons, when in reality, with them being such a young team, there is unbelievable upside here too. Like I said earlier, Shai's gotten better every year and has real number one option playoff experience under his belt now. Gonna have more freedom to operate inside the arc, spacing, a better team than ever supporting him. Same thing goes for Jalen Williams, who's going to be looked at as that consistent second ball handler. And with Giddey gone now and better weapons around him, J-Dub, in my opinion, is going to explode onto the scene. This will be an all-star caliber season from him, where he could get close to 23, 24, even up to 25 points per game. Maybe not that high because there are a lot of mouths to feed, but he's going to get up into the mid-20s, and his efficiency is going to continue to be ridiculous. By the way, he just had one of the most efficient jump shooting seasons we've ever seen, especially from a second-year player, and now he's got that playoff experience under his belt. He's ready to be that second option. Chet, monster offensively last season, and now has had a full year of that NBA physicality, especially when you consider the fact that last season he was coming off a season-ending injury. He did a bunch of rehab in the summer, so now he's gotten some time to really get into the gym, learn what it's like to play in the NBA alongside his teammates. It's going to make life so much easier for him. And you talk about the other guys. Cason Wallace, 20 years old. Isaiah Joe, 24. Aaron Wiggins, 25. Lu Dort, 24. This is a very young team. The oldest guy in the roster is Alex Caruso at 30 years old. Oh, and once again, they are coached by Mark Daigneault, who's the coach of the year. They have a million picks still at their disposal, specifically at the hands of Sam Presti, who is one of the best GMs in the business, so they can use those to upgrade this season if they'd like to, or do it next season. Doesn't matter because the picks are still coming for years. They're a top 5 team on both ends. They added 2 of the best role players possible, have an MVP level player, a top 5 player in the league in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, 2 all-stars in the making supporting him, and a deep rotation that can shoot, defend, and pass, and now rebound better than ever with the addition of Isaiah Isaiah Hartenstein. It is a team with little to no holes on it. I guess they still don't have a ton of experience, but they just did make a second round run. Caruso has been to an NBA Finals. He's an NBA champion. Hartenstein has had some runs in his time. And this is a team that's always defied odds. They were just the youngest one seed ever, the youngest team to ever win a playoff series. People thought they might really struggle more than they did, and they made things interesting with the Dallas Mavericks, who had a lot more experience than them. And the cherry on top of this whole thing is that the Thunder don't really have any reason to regress unless they deal with injuries, which, knock on wood, fingers crossed that they don't. But like, the only guy they gave up this offseason was Josh Giddey, who again wasn't that great this past season. It's not like a lot of other teams who will make some big acquisitions, they will improve the team, but it's like, oh, they traded that guy, or these two players had to walk to make the salary work. The Thunder didn't have to do that. They didn't even have to give up a single first-round pick to bring in Caruso and Isaiah Hartenstein. I don't think it's biased at all to say that this is the best team in the Western Conference and that they have a very, very real chance to win the NBA Finals this year and for years to come going forward with this group. This team is scarier than people think. If they win 60-plus games, not surprised. If they win the Western Conference, I'm not surprised. If they win the NBA Finals, I'm not surprised. If Shai wins MVP, if the Thunder have multiple guys on all defensive teams, if they're the best defense in the league, if they end up as the best offense in the league, none of this stuff would surprise me. If they have 3 All-Stars with Shai, Chet, and Jalen Williams, it would not surprise me. This is a juggernaut of a team in the making, assuming everything clicks together the way that I think it will, and there's no reason for me not to expect it to. I am unbelievably excited. If you can't tell by the fact that this video, I think, went way longer than I meant for it to, this is going to be a special season from the Oklahoma City Thunder, and I do firmly believe that this will be the year they make it back to the NBA Finals for the first time in over a decade, and we'll have to see if they can either dethrone the Boston Celtics or beat whoever comes out of the East, but it's going to be a lot of fun. So that's my pretty long-winded rant about the Oklahoma City Thunder, where they are right now, why I'm so excited. Again, scarier than I think people realize. Even the people that are picking them to win the West don't realize just how insane this team could be. Let me know down below in the comments, what are your thoughts on the Thunder this season? Where do you project them in the standings? Do you think they can win the West, win the NBA Finals? Can Shai win MVP? Things like that. I appreciate you watching. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. We're going to have predictions coming up within the next couple of weeks for the full NBA season. That's awards, that's standings team by team, that is who ends up winning the NBA Finals, everything in between. It's going to be a lot of fun. And of course, with the season right around the corner, there's going to be a lot more content on the way. You don't want to miss out on it. So really do go ahead and subscribe, hit the notification bell. But yeah, I appreciate you watching. I'll see y'all later. Real one, stay back. Also, Thunder up.